Film number 55 is a documentary, a documentary film from 1935. This film is called Triumph of the Will. It's a German film. Hitler and his Nazis took over Germany in, 32, 33. This was 35. The war started in 38 when they invaded Poland. Triumph of the Will was a film commissioned by the Nazi Party, by Hitler by Goebbels. It was a propaganda film. It's the film, whenever you see those pictures that are just amazing, you can't believe that these were filmed that long ago, showing, 100,000 human beings standing there doing the Heil Hitler thing. Or you see Hitler driving by in a car and kissing babies and all this stuff, and the women are just like, oh, my Fuhrer. That's where those clips come from. It comes from Triumph of the Will. See, the film was made for the purpose of portraying Hitler as being worthy of being the emperor, which is essentially what Fuhrer is, the emperor of the Third Reich, and to portray the idea that everybody in Germany is behind that. Because once you portray a film like that, you might think Triumph of the Will was meant to show to the rest of the world so that other people would go, wow, that Hitler guy, wow, this is interesting. Everybody seems to like this Hitler guy. Maybe I should think about getting behind him. That's not the purpose of Triumph of the Will. Triumph of the Will was for the German people. Because nobody outside Germany is going to look at that and go, yeah, Hitler makes a lot of sense to me. There's some whack jobs who might do that through the years, but your average person is going to look at it and see Hitler for what he is. But if you're stuck in Nazi Germany, they want you to see Triumph of the Will in Germany. Why? For what I said in one of the other films I've talked about already. It's called social proof. It's manipulation. It's human manipulation. It's social engineering. If you don't know what to do, if somebody's telling you a big lie and you can't respond to them and challenge them to demonstrate that they don't know what they're talking about or that they're lying in front of other people, then you're stuck hearing what they say, knowing that everyone else heard what they say, and you have to sit there and try to figure out from the people around you, am I supposed to believe this stupidity or not? What this person just said is monumentally stupid. What do you mean we should defund the police? I mean, where's your brain? What? That's a little boy, not a little girl. What? If you're in a situation where people are broadcasting these lies to you, and you can't challenge what they're saying publicly so that everybody around can find out, oh, this person doesn't know what they're talking about, they're just spitting out a lie, you have no choice but to use what's called social proof. You look over there at that person, you look over there at that person, and you think, what do they think? Because I don't want to stand out. I don't want to be the only person standing up and saying, well, I think this is a bunch of baloney. If they all believe it, I've got to be, I don't want to be the odd man out. I don't want to be unpopular. I don't want to get canceled. I don't want to be persecuted. I don't want to be thrown into a gulag or executed or gassed in a gas chamber and burned in a crematorium and buried in a mass grave. In case you haven't figured out, that is what always happens to people when you allow a totalitarian society to take over. So how do you figure out if Hitler's saying something that's monumentally stupid and you know it's stupid, but you look over there and they seem to agree with Hitler, and you look over there and they seem to agree with Hitler, even if in your mind you still think Hitler's full of lies, you're now less inclined to talk about that publicly because you don't want to look bad in front of these people and because you don't want them to turn you into the Gestapo. That's why Triumph of the Will was made. It was for the German people. It was for the German people who had not fallen for Hitler's lie. Because once they see that film, they look at it and they go, holy smokes, there's 500,000 people out there doing the Heil Hitler thing. I can't fight this. I don't have any choice. I've just got to give in and accept it instead of fighting against it. That's the purpose of Triumph of the Will. Did you ever notice that when Donald Trump was overthrown and this banana republic who overthrew him took over the White House, did you ever notice that unlike with Donald Trump, they put it in this, it looks a lot like Triumph of the Will, doesn't it? You've got this old geezer and this younger woman who slept her way to the top, and they're out there running down they look like they're at a fashion show, and this old geezer who can barely keep his breath and can barely keep from tripping all over himself is literally jogging down this thing to try to look like he's virile and full of life. That's straight out of Triumph of the Will, folks. Or have you never seen the film to realize that? Perhaps you should watch Triumph of the Will, because it helps to explain how our society went insane. Number 56 is a movie from the year 2005, about 16 years ago. This one stars Hugo Weaving and Natalie Portman, among others. V for Vendetta. This one ranks up there among one of those great films with The Matrix and Fight Club and these really extraordinary films that came out that really made a serious point. V for Vendetta was set in the UK, a dystopian Great Britain of the near future. And it's interesting that in that film, the United States of America had collapsed. It had collapsed under its own weight, just like the Roman Empire did. It was no longer relevant to the rest of the world, which is kind of what's happening to the United States right now, following precisely in the footprints of the Roman Empire, which destroyed itself from within. It wasn't conquered by someone. It destroyed itself through sheer stupidity, and in particular through financial ruin by providing welfare to people. They couldn't afford it. It was unsustainable. In other words, they basically gave out stimulus checks until the country went bankrupt. Supply and demand. You might look at my existential threats to America. One of them is people's inability to and unwillingness to accept the reality of the law of supply and demand. They don't understand the law of supply and demand. You can't keep printing money forever. There will be consequences. Devastating consequences. It's almost as if the people printing all this money, handing out these stimulus checks, are trying to destroy the economy, if you understand the law of supply and demand. It's not almost like it is it. That's what they're doing, because there can be no other outcome when you just print out trillions of dollars. That alone tells you that they are deliberately trying to destroy the economy. It can't be any other way. The law of supply and demand is very easy to understand. Those people understand it. They understand it to the extent that they can use it as a weapon by violating it. When you violate natural law, the result is catastrophic. They are deliberately violating natural law in order to create a catastrophe. What comes out of a catastrophe? A national emergency. Usually some kind of dictatorship, totalitarian control that didn't exist before. Just something to think about. If you're ever wondering why somebody would want to manufacture a disaster. V for Vendetta takes place in the UK, though. At the time, the United States is not relevant anymore. The United States is basically a Mad Max scenario. It's just Americans killing each other, no longer a superpower, ripe for any nation. I mean, Sudan could come in and invade the United States of America and take them over effectively. That's how weak the United States of America was, just basically reduced to starvation, famine, death, and cannibalism, which is exactly where this country could be headed right now. Not in the next 5 years, but that's the direction we're headed for. But you have to know history to realize that, don't you? In V for Vendetta, you had the natural consequence of that. When the United States is gone, a moral power as much as a military superpower, when our moral authority is degraded, as now it's completely destroyed by these liberals who have no morals at all, just totally amoral. They have no foundation in truth or morality. It's just whatever I want is good. When that's gone from the world, in other countries, they're going to start springing up their own little mini dictatorships and totalitarian societies. Because they can. There's no superpower to stop them anymore. Well, in the movie V for Vendetta, Great Britain does exactly that. One of their really bad people in their government uses all the standard tools of manipulation to rise to the top and take totalitarian, dictatorial control over the entire British Islands. And hey, what do you know? You know how he did it? He created a fake pandemic. Drum roll, please. Let me repeat the year that V for Vendetta came out. 2005. 16 years ago. They created a fake pandemic. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that people weren't dying and they were just making it all up. What I'm saying is that if people stopped dying, agents of the government would go out and blow a little fairy dust into a public gathering. And then people started dying. By fake pandemic, I mean a manufactured crisis. If you recall, the final president of the United States of America, Donald Trump, what did he say coronavirus was? He said it was an attack by communist China on the rest of the world to destabilize the world. I'm not going to go into details of what China has done over the last 4 months now that they can do really nasty things because there's nobody in our government who's going to stop them. But the final president of the United States of America, before we became this banana republic, Donald Trump, told everybody repeatedly, this came from China, it was released deliberately, and they're going to pay for it, is what he said. If we had had that same president in office now, that is exactly what would be happening, based on his history of keeping his promises. But we don't have that now. We have a banana republic. Watch V for Vendetta and think about it. But there's more to it than that. This is a wonderful film because it isn't just subplots, it layers some really big ideas and thoughts on an equal footing, which is kind of rare for a film. Usually there's one big theme you're trying to get across and you have all these subplots going on in the background that make some points. V for Vendetta brings up 3 or 4 really important things that it maintains throughout the whole thing. Again, how many times have I said it in these films? And this is just a small sampling of films. Again, one of the themes in this film is, if you live your life in fear, you're already dead. It's not that you're as good as dead. It's not that you're just useless to humanity and therefore it doesn't really matter whether you're alive or not. That's true. You are useless to humanity and it doesn't matter whether you live or die in that sense if you're living in fear and terror. But it goes beyond that. You yourself are already dead. You don't exist. You don't live. There's no animation to you. There's nothing but fear. Nothing but fear that dominates your every action. Fear of him, fear of her, fear of that organization, fear of that institution, fear of being canceled, fear of being called a name. V for Vendetta makes a lot of these points. I highly recommend that you watch V for Vendetta. One of the great films in the last 20 years or so. Film number 57 is from the year 1997, which was, 4 years into, midway through Bill Clinton's presidency. About the time he's being reelected for his second term. It's called Wag the Dog. Now, this one had De Niro in it, who sadly appears to have he's kind of lost the good of intellect, you might say. It's really sad, especially considering that he made a film like this, which was trying to help people have an intellect. Wag the Dog was about just some random president, nobody in particular, just some president who liked to touch women, or maybe little girls, and he needed a way to get out of it because he got caught. So what's he do? He, creates some kind of a crisis that other people can focus their attention on. The kind of thing someone would do if, they wanted to overthrow a sitting president. They might create some kind of a distraction so that nobody can see or remember that that president had created the best conditions that this nation have had in decades. The best amount of hope that this country had had in decades. But if you have a distraction, you're going to a lot of people are going to forget about that. Well, in Wag the Dog, the president got caught with his hands in the girl's pants, and they brought in Mr. Fix-It. Mr. Fix-It was an expert in using the mass media to bend and twist Americans' minds, to distract them, so that they won't think about what's going on over here. The way they did it was to, in this case, was to start a war. William Randolph Hearst, you remember that other Citizen Kane? You furnish me the photos, I'll furnish you the war. That's what Mr. Fix-It was all about. That was Robert De Niro. Dustin Hoffman was in there. An incredibly good cast in this film. At the time it came out, it seemed pretty obvious the point it was trying to make. It's a lot like Network, but it's more of there's a lot more humor in this, a lot more overt humor, but it's still a dark comedy, like Network was. Wag the Dog was probably a spiritual successor to Network, from 20 years later. But it talks much more, it has some specifics in it, and it's well worth watching just for that. Things like, okay, here's what we need to do to manipulate the masses. Here's what we need to do. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. It almost sounds like he's following a playbook, isn't it? How many times in my videos have I mentioned a certain playbook that is used to manipulate the masses? A playbook that has been written for 500 years, but it's been perfected and honed over the last, roughly 30, 40, 50 years. And in 1988, it got the stamp of approval. Good to go. Publish it. The Anti-Smoking Playbook. What Mr. Fix-It does in there, it isn't identical to the Anti-Smoking Playbook, but it's basically pulling pages out of there. I bet you the authors of that didn't even know it. There's nothing magical about the Anti-Smoking Playbook. It's just that they had enough funding and they stole so many trillions of dollars from people that they could develop this kind of manipulation better than anyone else who wanted to manipulate people could. Plus, they had 500 years of experience doing nothing but telling lies. Of course, nobody believed them for 450 years, as you would expect, because it was so obvious they were lying. But then you had that magical secret sauce mixed in. Finally, you just take what the anti-smokers had done for 450 years and you mix in mass media, broadcast media, where they can talk to you, but you can't ask them questions. You can't stand with them standing on a stump like the Lincoln Douglas debates. You can't tell them, you need to prove what you just said in front of all these people. Instead, they just get to say it to all these people, and then all these people have to do the big lie thing and figure out, well, does he believe it? Do they believe it? They just said that smoking kills 400,000 Americans every year, but if you do the math on that, that's ludicrous. it doesn't jive with the reality of my experience throughout my lifetime, or my parents' experience, or my grandparents' experience. It sounds like a lie. Doesn't make any rational sense. I can't find any numbers that back this up. And I have a lot of very credible reports that say that the number was made up out of whole cloth. It was just a lie. But they seem to believe it. And this person over here seems to believe it. I don't know if I want to be the one person who stands up and says, I think these anti-smokers are lying. Those who live their life in fear are already dead. Do you see how all these things kind of go together? They don't exist in isolation. The reason our society went insane is because all of these things have been going on, swirling, merging, melding, melting into American society from all angles. It's all of it. It isn't just one of them. Hey, maybe that's why back in 2019 I published a video called 50 Greatest Existential Threats to America. And I said right in the video, it isn't that one of these is necessarily going to take us down. It's that all of them combined are taking us down. But what do I know? I'm just a homeless guy. What do I know? Wag the Dog from 1997, the middle of Bill Clinton's presidency, but it has nothing to do with the president in the film. Nothing to do with it. Number 58 is a film from the year 2009. It is called Watchmen. Watchmen is one of the darkest films I've ever seen. It ain't a dark comedy. It's a dark film. Really dark. A friend of mine recommended that I watch it. And I said, well, this looks like some kind of comic book superhero thing. Why would I want to watch that? That's silly. He said, just watch it. You'll understand. I was like, okay. I respected his opinion, and he knew me well. I watched it, and I was like, wow. Whoa. I see your point. Watchmen is a tough one. There's a lot going on there. I'm only going to focus on one aspect here, which is that in the end, the bad guy in this film, his attitude was that in order to fix the problems in the world, I need to destroy the world first. In other words, I can't just go out there as the world is and start knocking off. Oh, we're going to fix this issue. We're going to fix cancer. We're going to fix human trafficking. We're going to fix this, that, and the other thing. No, the only way we're going to do this is if we just destroy the world, bring everyone back to the Stone Age, and then start all over again. In other words, what some people today, these groups that are leading this charge to destroy our world, I mean, they even have the Latin. I'm so sorry, I'm drawing a blank here for some reason. Anno Munus Muni. Oh dear goodness, what is it? But out of chaos, order. In other words, we're going to create chaos. And once everyone's in chaos and they're all living in fear and they're terrified and they don't know what to do, we're going to come in as the saviors. And when it's all over, we're going to be in control. Before they had, maybe a free country that had local governments and it had a sheriff, a county sheriff, state government that were all totally independent with a federal government that really had no power at all over the states. If you didn't like living in one state, you moved to another one that had laws that you liked and people that you liked. All is good. Meanwhile, all the states, as different as they are, enjoy the protection from the federal government so that they can never be conquered or made into the same state repeated 50 times. If you want to destroy a country like that, what do you have to do? You've got people who really care in the school board, people who really care in your local city council, people who really care in your state legislature. And frankly, you have people who really care in your federal government, your federal Congress and courts everywhere. Now, it's not to say they're all perfect. But the checks and balances take care of that. If there's a bad apple, you can get rid of them using the checks and balances and free and fair elections that are not corrupted, as we saw last year. In a country like that, you will never, ever be able to conquer that nation because it's too stable. Stability is built into its constitution. It's the people themselves who run the country. How are you going to overthrow that? How are you going to convince people that the people are the problem? Especially when it has checks and balances, so that if one of the people is a problem, you can get rid of them, replace them. You need a new dog catcher because you got one who's corrupt? Get rid of them. Put another one in. It isn't like a king where it's all or nothing. You've got a king. They're either good or they're evil. If they're evil, your only choice is either to live a life of misery under this tyrant until he dies, or to assassinate him. Those are your options. In America, it was never that option. It was always we the people are in control. How do you destroy a country like that? The only way to do it is to create chaos in that country, so that now the dog catcher and the Department of Motor Vehicles are at each other's throats. Divide and conquer. You get people fighting against each other. All these people who used to run this country so smoothly, you get them fighting against each other. What? Racism was dealt with in the 19th and 20th centuries, such that toward the end of the 20th century, there really wasn't any such thing as racism to speak of. There were some racist people, but as far as the racism that characterized the nation in the early 19th century, it was gone. It was gone. Civil rights movement had gotten rid of it. Emancipation Proclamation, great civil rights leaders, movies like Blazing Saddles, it was gone. And now all of a sudden, 40 years later, we're sitting here and everybody's talking about racism. It's almost as if they're trying to create racism to divide and conquer us, isn't it? Watchmen is the name of the film. The guy who wants to take over everything, how's he going about it? Destroy it. And then I, as the big savior, will build it all up again. If you want to know why our society went insane, there you go, folks. It's the same thing you did in ancient times. Alexander the Great would do it. Caesars would do it. Hannibal would do it. Probably a couple of kids with sticks and stones 10,000 years ago would do it. You divide and you conquer. If you've got a superior force that you can't beat, you either don't fight them or you do something to get them fighting each other. And while they're fighting each other, you go in and you slaughter them. Duh. It's as much of natural law as the law of supply and demand. Divide and conquer. And how do you divide people? You create chaos where before there was a beautiful, wonderful stability. And hey, what do you know, if you look at the United States of America, that's exactly what we had until when? When? When did our society start going berserk and crazy? Yeah, 1960s. The hippie generation. The liberal, leftist takeover. I'm just saying. Watchmen. Watch it. Okay, I am back with the last two movies on my list of 60 films that explain how our society went insane. I originally had 59, but I had to redo number 59 for reasons you'll clearly understand in a moment, and then I decided I'm going to add a number 60 to make it a nice even 60. After that, I have a couple of honorable mentions, and then you're off to the movies. Number 59 is a movie from the year 2008. It's another comedy, and another one, believe it or not, from Adam Sandler. This film is called You Don't Mess with the Zohan. Alright? You Don't Mess with the Zohan is about... It's a comedy, borderline slapstick comedy, about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you might say. The first part takes place in Israel. The second part takes place in New York City. Or the second part takes place in New York City. Zohan, Adam Sandler's character, is an IDF hero. He's a hero of the Israeli Defense Forces, going up against the terrorists who are always attacking Israel. He goes up against John Turturro's character, who is the corresponding hero of the Palestinians. So when that's finished, Zohan moves to New York City. Now when he gets to New York City, what he finds is that in America, the Israelis and the Palestinians live right across from each other, and they don't fight at all. There's nothing to bring them apart. They are brought together as Americans. And it's a nice thing. But somebody who wants to manipulate both the Israelis and the Palestinians for their own personal purposes brings in and drives a wedge between them, even in New York City. Now, again, this was 2008, folks. I think you see the reason I had to redo this one right now. Since I recorded this the first time, about a week and a half ago, Israel has been pounded by something like 4,000 rockets sent by Hamas, particularly from Gaza, into Israel to just randomly kill innocent whoever's there. Men, women, children, elderly, whatever. Cows. In fact, this has really inspired me. I'm going to try to do a longer video about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because Americans just don't have the foggiest idea generally what the real deal is there. And I want to do my part to fix that. But as far as these... Excuse me. But as far as this list of films goes, it's that last part I want you to pay special attention to. Now, even though the film is done in a farcical manner, the truth is still there. There are people at the top who pull the strings, who will use the classic, time-tested, ancient method of divide and conquer. If you want to destroy a nation that is as powerful as the United States of America, not just militarily, but our Constitution, it's made out of granite encased in solid steel. The Constitution protected us for 200 years. If you want to destroy a country like that, where you have a melting pot of all these people from all these cultures and countries around the world who get along together as equals or relative equals, I mean, even in a high school full of white people or a high school full of black people, you still have all these tiers, the people who want to be in control and, bullies and things like that. That's just part of life. But in terms of just people from different backgrounds being on an equal footing, nothing has ever approached what the United States of America has accomplished. It's just built into the foundation of the Constitution. And yet, if you want to destroy a country like that, how are you going to do it? You have to destroy the Constitution. You have to destroy people's appreciation for the Constitution. You have to destroy people's willingness to fight and die to protect and preserve the Constitution. You need to destroy patriotism. And you need to create a bunch of you need to use divide and conquer to get people fighting against each other so that they don't even look upwards to see who is trying to dominate all of them. This stuff that happened a year ago here in Minnesota. Minnesota is a very racist state. Yes, it's an incredibly osteophobic state. They hate the homeless. But in terms of black racism, I have seen more of it here than anywhere else. As an aside, I have a coworker here who, not at my same location, so we were working via chat. And somehow we got on this topic. He's black, and he came from New York City when he was young. He came over to Minneapolis, and he was saying, I didn't understand it. I had never experienced racism in my life, and I got here, and people are using the N-word, and they're doing all the classic things that racists do. And Minnesota was supposed to be this nice, friendly place, and you can imagine how I responded to that one, right? So when something like a Black Lives Matter is formed by these people, these puppet masters up here who you don't see, when something like that is funded and supported and promoted by the people who want to control everyone, including the people who run Black Lives Matter, by the way. They might think they're cool because they have $1 million homes now that they bought last year, but the puppet masters at the top can end their lives just like that. See, that's the problem. They're called useful idiots. It's just like Governor Tim Walz, a useful idiot. These puppet masters are just, oh, here you go, Governor Walz, here's what you're going to do. Stay-at-home order, you're going to make everyone wear a mask. You do. Divide and conquer. That is the theme of You Don't Mess with the Zohan. But it's also just a very, very funny film. Unfortunately, it is the film in this list that has the most quantity of juvenile sexual, humor throughout the movie. Sorry, I can't do anything about that. Adam Sandler, please, just stop that stuff. It doesn't need to be there. I mean, it's cute, it's kind of funny, but please, it just doesn't need to be there. Anyway, the film itself does a really good job in a farcical manner, again, without being oppressively preachy or anything. It does a really good job of showing how divide and conquer can be used to destroy even the tightest bonds, the strongest family, the strongest nation the world has ever known. That's what we're witnessing today. And all these other things and all these other films are part of the strategies to create divide and conquer. It's the only way you can take down the United States. And it's exactly what these loony leftists have been doing since the teens, 20s, 1930s. Since they came in and started with their plans to do this. And you can either not accept it and suffer the consequences and realize that because of your laziness and inaction, your children are really the ones who are going to suffer. You can either do that, or you can dig inside yourself, forget about the Wizard of Oz, dig inside yourself and find the courage to start thinking about what is real instead of these illusions that are painted for you on every idiot box that you stare at all day long. And then start doing something about it. We have a duly elected president of the United States who was overthrown in an act of treason 6 months ago. What are you going to do about it? A true American would say, you know what? I didn't want Trump to be president. I wanted Biden to be president, but more important than anything else is that the Constitution remains intact. It is obvious that Trump won this election. And even though I voted for Biden, not because I necessarily like him maybe, but because he was the Democratic candidate, I wanted him to win. But he didn't. He lost, and he took over anyway. That's an act of treason. So as an American, I want to fight for justice in that election. I want the correct winner of that election to be in office, and I want the one who committed treason to suffer the criminal penalty for treason. And then if you're in that situation, then you would say, and I hope in the next election my Democratic candidate will win the White House. Nothing wrong with that. That's what America is supposed to be about. But if you're not willing to put the Constitution up above your personal hatred of Donald Trump, then you just have Trump derangement syndrome and you're basically insane. You have a mental illness. And divide and conquer, that Trump derangement syndrome and that mental illness is one of the tactics used to destroy this country. You can face that reality, or you can call me names. I don't care if you call me names. There's a lot of people alive today and who will be alive in the future who are counting on you to pay attention and to do the right thing. That brings me to film number 60, which is the last film on this list. It's the one that I just added now. I have a whole bunch of other films, but I had to decide which one to put in there. This film is from 1983. It's actually a concert. It's a music concert by my band, Rush. Sorry, I have to wipe the sweat off my brow here. It is, like I said, about 85 degrees now. The film is called Exit Stage Left, and it's just nothing more than a concert video of Rush right after they did the Moving Pictures album. That's the one with Tom Sawyer and Limelight on it. So their music prior to that is in this film. The reason I want you to watch this is because you need to be reminded of what good music is, what music is, and why it is so important to our culture and our tradition, even though they're Canadian, but Western civilization, why it is so important that we maintain the integrity of things like language and music. Exit Stage Left is 3 young men, relatively uneducated, more or less got out of high school and formed a band. 3 people. Listen to that concert, the whole concert, but especially the songs Xanadu, The Trees, and La Villa Strangiato. You would be hard-pressed to have a band of maybe 6 or 7 talented musicians who could produce the amount of sound that these guys did. Alex Lifeson on guitar, he's playing rhythm and lead guitar. And he's also responsible for general mayhem on stage. Geddy Lee, he's singing. He's playing bass guitar, one of the best bass guitarists in the world. And Alex is one of the best guitarists. He's playing synthesizers. He's playing bass pedals with his feet. And then, of course, Neil Peart on drums, the professor, one of the most influential drummers ever. May he rest in peace. 3 people. And they were probably, about 32, 35 years old tops then? Maybe 30 years old? Watch Exit Stage Left and realize what real music is. Listen to the lyrics. Look at the complexity of that music with no musical training to speak of. No particular education beyond high school. And then look at the garbage we have today. Listen to the pop music, the crap we have. The stuff that is literally written by a computer algorithm that just strings notes together in harmonies, and then they pull some muffy or some stud out of a high school and put him in tight clothes because they have a nice singing voice and say, here, replicate what this computer did. Folks, if we don't get back our culture, if we don't get back... Music is a matter of mathematics, it's a matter of aesthetic beauty, it is integration of lyric, the language, beautiful language, and melody, harmony, and rhythm. There's a lot going on with really good music. And that's why Exit Stage Left, I think, is a good ending for this video. Because when you realize what has happened to our music, you realize that the people who are controlling that are controlling you. By dumbing down their music, they're dumbing down you, and you shouldn't tolerate it. This thing's starting to overheat. I'll be back in a moment with the honorable mentions. Okay, so with the few remaining minutes I have before this camera overheats again, let me go over a couple of honorable mentions here. There's actually 4 of them. The reason these are not in the main list is because in many ways they require an extraordinary amount of thought. These films are the Plato's Academy of Hollywood. They're asking eternal questions, the kind of things that Plato and Aristotle, would mull over, Socrates. And if you're not willing to think, if you're not willing to supercharge your brain and get the thing working, these movies probably won't mean anything to you and you should just disregard them. But for those of you who have the courage and the stamina and the desire to really know the truth about the world you live in, these 4 films will help stir up that within you. The first one and the easiest one to take is the original Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston. In terms of filmmaking, there's a lot of cheese in that film, but wow, what a statement it made. And yeah, it's right in your face, there's no doubt. At many levels, but Planet of the Apes, by just simply taking another species and having it do what human beings do, for some reason, all of a sudden you start to see the stupidity, the racism, the idiocy, the bureaucracy, the corruption, the hatred of the truth, the propaganda and spreading of lies and disinformation and deceit, just by taking some random species and attributing human characteristics to it. It becomes obvious right in your face. And that's something to think about. The question is, why do we not see it in our own species? It's right there. as blatantly as it is among the apes in Planet of the Apes. If you don't see it all around you, why is that? The next two are kind of complementary. And these are really tough ones to watch. The first one is The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind with Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet. The second one is Vanilla Sky with Tom Cruise and many other people, Penelope Cruz and such. They're asking two different questions, but these are the kinds of eternal questions that Socrates would have been discussing in Greece. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind basically is asking this question. If you have pain in your life, you had a painful, abusive upbringing or something like that, or something happened to you like what happened to me, where due to just laziness and corruption and low-class people running an entire state, I had to lose everything I worked my entire life for. Essentially had my life stolen from me, which is tantamount to murder. And nobody even cares. If you have something that's that painful in your life, if someone could come up to you and offer you a procedure that would make you forget about that, so that it was no longer in your memory, and you could just go about with the rest of your life, would you do it? That's what Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is asking. Vanilla Sky is asking a different question, a similar but different question. Vanilla Sky says that here you are going about your life as it is right now, the good, the bad, and the ugly. If someone could come along and give you a procedure that would basically fill your mind with a fantasy world that is a utopia, something that you just love and enjoy. Kind of asking the question like, which one was it? Total Recall. It's very similar to Total Recall. But if someone could come along and offer you a procedure that would just give you this, but it's nothing but an illusion, it isn't real, it's a fantasy, would you do it? That's what those films are asking. Now, when I frame it this way, it sounds like, oh, well, this is pretty heavy-duty stuff. I mean, that's all, there's considerations over here and pros and cons. You can go through all that if you want, and this is the kind of thing Socrates would talk about. Or you can look at it another way and say, well, someone in my situation who lost everything he worked for at the hands of just truly evil people, from my landlord to the police department where I was at, all the way up to the governor's office and everyone in between, and everyone since, the news media, just absolute, total garbage can corruption. That's the state of Minnesota. If I wanted some procedure that would make me forget all of that, so that I wouldn't think about it and feel the pain, it already exists, folks. It's called booze, drugs. I could just go out and get stoned and forget all about it. I could go out and get drunk. And hey, what do you know? When you look at America's homeless people, a lot of them are drinking all the time or using drugs, aren't they? I wonder if there's a connection. Maybe if those people have gotten help when they first became homeless, they wouldn't have gone that route to try to drown out the pain. But as I've said in these videos, based on my observations over the last 6 years, the people who are consuming the most alcohol, the most drugs per capita, are the people living in these houses, these nice suburban and wealthy and poor, impoverished houses, apartments all around Minnesota. They're the housed people, not the homeless people. Do you think the homeless people are the ones keeping the drug trade in business? Tens, hundreds of billions of dollars a year spent on illegal drugs. You think homeless people, 4 million homeless people are paying for all that? No. No, it's this weirdo who stopped his car right in front of me so he can stare right at me right now. He's the one doing it. It's the high school teacher out there who's using meth and bringing it with her to school. It's the lawyer down there who's sitting there snorting cocaine before he goes into a courtroom to defend you, to protect your interests. Those are the people who are trying to escape whatever their pain is. I don't do drugs. I never have. I don't like booze. I don't like what it does to me. I made my choice. I prefer reality. I don't like the reality of this situation. I don't like it one bit. I don't like the fact that Minnesota exists and that Minnesotans exist as the kind of people they are. I don't like it. Two wrongs don't make a right. I'm not going to consume something that makes me forget what they did. I'm going to remember it, and I'm going to tell other people about it. As for Vanilla Sky, the question of, well, if someone could come up and give you something that fills you with a fantasy that is so much better than your ordinary life right now, it's the same thing, folks. If what you have now isn't good enough, if you don't have it within you to make it good enough, no matter what you have, then you're going to go to drugs, you're going to go to alcohol, you're going to go to something, gambling addiction, which, you know, a state like Minnesota will be happy to help you with because they have vending machines for lotto tickets, but they don't have vending machines for cigarettes. You see, because the state is running that racket. And that's why those two films are so important, but they are really difficult questions to think about. Because the deeper you go down that rabbit hole, the more you start to realize, I have been doing something to make me forget what the real world's like. And the more I do that, the more useless to this world I become. The more useless to my children. The more useless to future generations I become. Is that what you want for your life? Each of us has to decide. The last film on my honorable mentions is one of the most difficult films you could ever watch. I believe it's from let me take a peek here. Yeah, 1991. This one stars Mimi Rogers and David Duchovny. It's called The Rapture. It's a hard one to find, and it's a hard one to watch. The Rapture is about the rapture, you know, in Christian doctrine. The rapture is when Jesus returns to take his church to heaven in the very end times, about 7 years before the end of the world, when he's going to go back to working with Israel exclusively. And a lot of people who follow the Bible and Bible prophecy have realized that all the signs in the Bible are coalescing around right about now. So the rapture, there's a lot of talk about the rapture over the last several decades. Well, this film was about that. But the thing is, even if you're correct, even if you believe a Bible that is in fact the Word of God, it is possible for you to still delude yourself, to be deceived, to deceive yourself. And if you do that, you could end up heading off on a very, very dark path, when your goal all along was to head down the path of light. You know, it's like that movie Primal Fear that I have on here. When you have experts, lawyers and judges whose job it is to ferret out deception, that's their job. Police detectives, their job is to find deception, to expose it. That's what I do. And even those people can be deceived, and even I could be. Anybody can. It's something you have to watch out for your entire life. Well, in the rapture, these people were seeking the rapture, and they started to realize, hey, this appears to be true. The Bible validates itself when you really look into it, and they were waiting for the rapture, but then they took it too far. They ended up joining a cult who claimed to know when the rapture was going to be, but the Bible clearly says you will not know the day or the hour. It's just going to suddenly happen. While I'm making this film, I could just disappear. The ending of the film, The Rapture, again, is one of the most difficult scenes to watch in all of film history. It's probably one reason why you haven't heard of this film. It's very, very difficult. But you really should watch The Rapture, and you should really think about it. Don't think about it in terms of cults or those crazy Christians or something like that. That isn't the appropriate way to think of this film. The appropriate way to think of this film is that the film never resolves well, it kind of does, actually. I don't want to give away, I don't want to spoil it, but the film does resolve whether or not their general idea of matters was correct or not. Okay? So that's not in question in the film. The question is, if you're generally following the truthful and correct path, but it's just too hard, and things aren't happening quick enough for your tastes, and you're getting antsy, and you want a solution now, gotta have it now, me, you're gonna start being susceptible to deception that can lead you into really terrible places. That's what the Rapture's about, and without wanting to spoil it, I'm gonna leave it at that. Folks, I really appreciate you watching this series on the 60 films that explain how our society went insane. There are many more films that contribute to this understanding, but I think the group I gave you are a good sampling, and with my explanations, I hope you will go out and go through the list, write down the ones that you think are interesting, watch them, and watch them with a view toward what I mentioned in these explanations here. And maybe you'll start to see the world differently. It's very important that you do, because if the only thing you're seeing is what you're seeing on an idiot box, whether it's a small one in your hand or the big one, 48-inch one on your wall, why are you even here? If that's your existence, is to just watch that and consume that and believe that without any question at all, why are you even here? There's a real world going on outside of that little box that you're staring at. As I stare at this box, there's somebody over there doing something. As I stare at this box, there's somebody over there doing something. They might be minding their own business, or they might be walking toward me with a gun, getting ready to carjack this car. But how do I know if I'm staring at this box? There might be people up there who want to take away my freedom and my constitutional rights and my heritage of great traditions of Route 66 and the Constitution and patriotism. But if I'm staring at this idiot box, I don't know what these people are doing up here, do I? Folks, I'm here to help. I could be playing guitar or reading books, learning things. I could be doing something else. I'm not paid to do these videos. I'm trying to help you. Pick a few of these films and watch them. See what it does for you. Don't be afraid of improving yourself. Don't be afraid of moving toward reality. Yeah, it's difficult. It's tough. But you have the brains in you. You have the heart in you. You have the courage in you. And if you want to bring this nation back to the home, sweet home that it was for all of us, like presented in The Wedding Singer in the 80s. And even then, this country had already been dilapidated quite a bit. But if you want to bring us back to a nation that is worth having, something that is worth, an inheritance that's worth passing on to your kids, you got to start looking at reality. And the irony is, one of the best ways to learn how to do that is to look at these movies, which really exist in the fantasy world. Isn't that curious how that works? Thanks again for watching so much, alright? Have fun watching these films. And please come back. As I said, I'm going to try to put together a video about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because that's one thing that Americans are absolutely oblivious to, and that needs to change. Thanks a lot.